Thank you. I'm always happy to go first. I wanted to start today with a little recap of our 2024 seasonal numbers for volunteering. This year we had 2,830 total volunteers and 117 volunteer day events. Total amount of hours donated to working in the park was 8,700. And we'll be kicking off the new volunteer season beginning in late March or early April. Our corporate memberships who are participating in the program, we now have 55. There are also 25 business council companies, 60 community partners, and the corporate department is on track to make about $1.25 million in revenue this year. On the individual giving side, we have crossed $1 million in donations through January 15th. Our winter end of year campaign officially doesn't end until the 31st, so there will be a little bit more coming in before the end of our fiscal year. And we now have 1,100 Friends members. Our foundations are doing well this year. We have pledges of more than $400,000, which is a big improvement over past years for us in the foundations department. And roughly 1.3 million has come in so far this year from our board of directors. For events, the gala last October raised 2.6 million, and our playground committee luncheon, which is coming up on March 7th, has a goal of $430,000. Additional events being planned right now for the spring are a Give Where You Live reception at one of the homes of a board member, a Rebecca Art Gallery tour with the development committee, followed by a reception, and the New York City Half Marathon with 10 runners currently raising funds for Team HRPK. There is also going to be a Business Council Speaker Series event, a volunteer appreciation celebration, and a Four-Legged Friends dog run activation. And lastly, the new projects that are being initiated in the coming couple of months are a capital campaign feasibility study for the estuarium funding, a Hudson River Park archiving project that we're working with the trust on to organize the mountains of photographic and documentary materials that are in a large room in the bowels of Pier 40. Through a multi-year grant application to the Leon Levy Foundation, which we've been invited to apply for through a contact on our board of directors. And then I believe by the end of February, we'll be working with the Harvard Business School's Community Partners Alumni Group in New York City on a pro bono basis on major donor research and major donor strategy initiative. And that's it, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Connie, who did you say was supporting the archive project?
The Leon Levy Foundation.
I was just, okay, got it, yeah.
Thank you for that report.
We have a quorum now, so you can start from the beginning.
And we have a quorum, so good afternoon, everybody. With a quorum being present, I now call to order the January 30th, 2025 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. Please note that the meeting is being shown live via Zoom and is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the Trust website, and the stenographer will provide a transcript of the meeting. The directors have received the agenda materials in advance of this meeting and are free to ask questions or comment at any time on the action items submitted for approval today. Please note, however, questions or comments from the audience will not be entertained at this meeting. I note that the board memos and resolutions on today's agenda have been posted on the Trust website in the link entitled Board Meetings, Bylaws, and Other Materials under Board Agendas and Minutes, and thus are available to the public. There are 8 items on the consent agenda. 1, approval of minutes and ratification of the actions taken at the December 12th, 2024 meeting of the Hudson River Park Trust Board of Directors. 2, authorization to contract with Peligro Sports Productions, Inc. and Global Links Holdings Incorporated for logo uniform components. 3, authorization to contract with Barrier One Systems, LLC for security gate maintenance and repair services. 4, authorization to amend contract with Dennis L. Cunning for Pier 40 Garage Operations Auditing and Oversight Services. 5, authorization to amend contract with Versig LLC for park-wide access control. 6, authorization to extend contract term with Gilbane Building Company for Pier 97 and Gansmore Peninsula Construction Management Services. 7, authorization to extend contract term with Bureau Veritas North America, Inc. for park-wide inspection and testing services. And 8, adoption of 2025 procurement guidelines. Unless anyone has any comments, I will now call for a motion to approve all items on the consent agenda. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The first corporate action before the board is authorization to contract with M&J Engineering for park-wide construction management services.
The trust requires the services of an on-call construction manager to support capital maintenance, repair, and other construction projects that become necessary from time to time. Some of the currently anticipated construction projects include replacement of the synthetic turf at Piers 25 and 46, repairs to the roofs at the Pier 25 mini golf building and the Piers 66, 84, and 96 boathouses, and park-wide unit paving. In accordance with the trust procurement guidelines, a request for proposals for park-wide construction management services was posted in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website for the period between October 30th through December 10th, 2024. The trust received 21 proposals by the submission deadline. A selection committee comprised of members of the trust design and construction, operations, and legal staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each submission according to the identified selection criteria in the RFP. Interviews were conducted with the 2 highest ranked firms. The selection committee determined M&J Engineering to be the most qualified firm with the best price to complete the work and thus offers the best value to the trust. M&J is a New York State certified minority business enterprise and has previously provided construction management services to the trust for the recent reconstruction of the Pier 45 deck. In addition, M&J has other on-call contracts with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, Department of Design and Construction, and Department of Environmental Protection. The trust therefore requests board authorization to contract with M&J Engineering, DPC, for park-wide construction management services for a contract value not to exceed $1.4 million, plus a 10% contingency, for a total board authorization amount of up to $1,540,000 over a 5-year period contract term. Funds would be available from the New York State and New York City sources for specific projects and from the trust capital maintenance budget as approved by the board each year.
Questions or comments? Hearing none, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with M&J Engineering, DPC, for park-wide construction management services.
Move to adopt.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The second corporate action item before the board is authorization to contract with Rycon Group LLC for park-wide marine repair. Ms. Doyle.
The trust has established a comprehensive waterfront infrastructure maintenance program that entails in-water and above-water inspections of piers, docks, and bulkheads, and conducted by qualified engineers on a staggered schedule. The resulting inspection reports note structural defects resulting from factors like age and expected weathering in the harsh marine environment, and make recommendations for repairs based on severity of damage and professional risk assessment. In order to complete the currently identified marine repairs throughout the park, the trust now requires a qualified marine construction contractor to perform such work. An advertisement for the request for proposals for park-wide marine repair was published in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website for the period between October 22nd through December 12, 2024. During this period, the trust extended the advertisement period through December 19th and received 5 proposals by the submission deadline. A selection committee comprised of members of the trust design and construction, operations and facilities management, and legal staff reviewed the submissions and evaluated each submission according to the selection criteria in the RFP. Interviews were conducted with the 2 highest ranked firms, and a best and final offer request was issued to those 2 firms. The selection committee determined Rycon Group to be the most qualified firm with the best price to complete the work and thus offers the best value to the trust. Rycon is a well-qualified marine contractor that has previously provided marine repair services to the trust for the reconstruction of Pier 40 piles, routine marine repairs in segments 3, 4, and 7 of the park, and placement of oyster structures in the Tribeca Habitat Enhancement Area. Rycon has completed similar work for the New York City's Department of Economic Development Corporation and Department of Design and Construction, the Brooklyn Bridge Park Corporation, and the City of Hoboken. Because of the nature of the specialized marine work, no MWBE or SDVOB subcontracting goals were included in the RFP. The trust therefore requests board authorization to contract with Rycon Group LLC for park-wide marine repair in an amount not to exceed $10,891,939 plus a 10% contingency for a total board authorization amount of up to $11,981,133 over a 4-year contract term. The repair services will be funded through the trust capital maintenance budget as approved by the board of directors each year.
Questions? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to contract with Rycon Group LLC for park-wide marine repair.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. The third corporate action before the board is authorization to contract with 6W Entertainment, Inc. for direction and talent services for Broadway by the boardwalk. Please go ahead.
In summer 2024, the trust launched a new free public music program, Broadway by the Boardwalk, in the Clinton Cove section of Hudson River Park. Notable Broadway talent performed original music, favorite songs, and Broadway standards, allowing the public to enjoy their favorite stars up close in a lush park setting at sunset. For 2025, the trust is planning to expand the Broadway series from 4 events to 6 events. Staff seeks to retain a producer to manage the Broadway series over a 5-year contract period. A request for proposals for direction and talent services for Broadway by the Boardwalk was posted in the New York State Contract Reporter and on the trust website on November 26th, and the trust received 3 responsive proposals by the submission deadline of January 6, 2025. The trust selection committee, consisting of staff in the public programs and legal departments, reviewed the submissions and evaluated each based on the criteria set forth in the RFP. The selection committee determined that 6W Entertainment, Inc. was the most qualified of the respondents, offering a fair and reasonable fee that represented the best value for the trust. 6W Entertainment successfully produced the first Broadway series in 2024 and has extensive experience managing similar events in public spaces throughout New York City, including with such clients as the New York City Department of Transportation and God's Love We Deliver. Because there are no subcontracting opportunities for this work, the trust waived the MWBE and SDVOB subcontracting goals prior to the release of the RFP. Trust staff seeks board approval to contract with 6W Entertainment for direction and talent services for the Broadway by the Boardwalk series for a total contract amount not to exceed $350,000 over the 5-year contract period. Funding would be available from the trust operating budget as approved by the board of directors each year.
Any comments, questions?
Can we sing? A little sorry.
Do you want to take the stage?
No, but I'm proud to make the motion to adopt as somebody who attended this program.
Second, without song.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved.
We're all offbeat on that one.
The fourth corporate action before the board is authorization to amend the contract with Savetta and Sons, Inc. for Pier 97 building general construction and to extend contract terms for Pier 97 building construction contractors. Ms. Doyle.
In July 2021, the trust issued 4 separate requests for proposals for general construction, plumbing, mechanical, and electrical work for the Pier 97 building construction as required by Wick's law. At the September 2021 meeting, the board approved maximum contract values for each of these Pier 97 construction contracts. And subsequently, at the December 2nd, 2021 meeting, the board ratified and approved 4 separate 2-year contracts with Savetta and Sons for general construction Eastern Plumbing and Mechanical Contracting for plumbing construction, ACS System Associates for mechanical construction, and Interphase Electric Corporation for electrical construction. At its December 23rd and September 2024 meetings, the board authorized extensions of the terms for all four contracts through August 31st, 2025, and an additional $100,000 for the Interphase contract for the installation of security cameras and access controls. Construction of the Pier 97 building was initially delayed due to foundation obstructions, if you may recall. More recently, there have been delays stemming from utility connections, but completion is now expected to occur by spring. The trust anticipates needing up to $250,000 in additional costs for Savetta to support the work of the other Wicks Law trades and subcontractors to complete the project. This additional authorization includes approximately $100,000 in contingency to address any requests that could potentially be made by the New York City Department of Buildings to obtain the certificate of occupancy for the building. Staff thus seeks board approval to amend the contract with Savetta and Sons, Inc. for the Pier 97 building construction work by adding $250,000 to the contract for a total board authorization amount of up to $10,775,375 and to extend the contract term by 4 months. Funding for the amendment to the Savetta contract is available from restricted funds from the prior sale of development rights within Manhattan Community Board 4. The trust further seeks board approval to extend the terms of the contracts with each of the contractors for the Pier 97 building plumbing construction work, mechanical construction work, and electrical construction work by an additional 4 months.
Questions or comments? If not, I will call for a motion to authorize the trust to amend the contract with Savetta and Sons, Inc. for Pier 97 building general construction and to extend contract terms for Pier 97 building construction contractors.
So-
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion is approved. Thank you. That completes the board action items for approval today. I would now like to ask Ms. Doyle to present the president's report on behalf of trust.
I'll begin as usual with design and construction. In December, contractors carefully placed the large boulders. Do we have our slideshow going? Carefully placed the large boulders that will help create a distinctive entrance to Pier 97. Contractors are also working on installing the decorative pavement in the zone where Pier 97 meets the upland area. And as just noted, staff expects that the Pier 97 Park Building, which you can see in the next photo taken in the snow last Monday, I think, will be complete by spring. Work was paused last week due to the extremely cold temperatures, but as of Monday had begun again. As you know, in 2024, the trust entered into a contract with Hudson Meridian to serve as the CM construction manager as builder for an array of upcoming core infrastructure repairs needed at Pier 40, including the ongoing sprinkler system work, structural repairs identified in the 2023 parking inspection mandated by state and city laws, and other on-call projects. As discussed at the time, there's a great deal of complexity involved in coordinating the construction while keeping the parking garage, ball fields, and the trust own operations open and in use as much as possible while needed capital maintenance occurs. Since then, Hudson Meridian has been gathering information and assessing conditions to inform recommendations for trust staff related to phasing and bidding the necessary work efficiently. I'll be providing updates for the board of directors on recommendations as soon as more information is available, which we expect will be before the March meeting and before the budget is finalized in March. Work to repair the damage from the fire at the West 26th Street Park Maintenance Building has been progressing well. The contractor has completed structural roof repairs, replaced damaged insulation, and cleaned the interior of the building. Remaining work includes the replacement of metal roof sections and damaged steel doors. The building should be restored to full operation by trust staff next month. Trust has already received a check for about 2/3 of the projected cost of the repair from the trust property insurance carrier, and we expect to receive additional reimbursement from the carrier once all work is completed and all invoices submitted. As approved by the board today, the trust will be contracting with MJ Engineering to serve as the parkwide construction manager for a number of upcoming projects. We'll of course be coordinating with stakeholders like the boathouse permittees before commencing work on the boathouse roofs. There's other things that they will be busy in the park doing too. Pavement repairs are a constant pretty much at any point. Christine?
Courthouse, when we are reconstructing, have we increased the level of fire protection that we have?
And for the park maintenance building? No, I don't think we have changed the details. And in fact, the building withstood the fire pretty well. It was the fire department needing to cut a hole into the roof in order to extinguish the fire and make sure that it was fully vented, I think, is the answer that really caused some of the damage that was there. Am I correct that we didn't really change the details of the design?
we didn't change the details.
Okay.
And I can point out that the fire here, it was caused by somebody who lit something, but had to do with the vegetation growing on the side of the building. None of our other buildings have that. So this one's unique in that regard.
Staff has also been working with the consultant that you approved last year, Evergreen Architectural Arts, on recommendations and scopes of work for some of the public art that we have in the park. And we'll be proceeding with repairs to the mural in the Pier 40 lobby that we inherited. That is actually a rather interesting piece if you've never taken the time to look at it, from the Holland America lines, the LGBT memorial, and the base of the apple sculpture. We're also going to be cleaning two large tables at 29th Street. Separately, we expect to install replacements for the shade structures at Pier 45 before summer. These are the tensile structures that are rather signature to the pier, and they are looking a little ratty at this point. As approved by the board today, the trust will commence recommended marine repairs as soon as we secure the necessary environmental permits for the work. Moving to design, the trust and its design team hosted a very successful public engagement meeting on January 13th at the Intrepid to begin addressing the design plans for the area north of Pier 79 to Pier 84. Thanks several of you for attending that. Over 70 members of the public participated in the meeting, and after a presentation by Marvell, our design team, participants worked in groups to discuss problems and ideas for the various sub-areas within the zone. The design team is digesting and consolidating the comments and feedback received, which will inform the eventual design effort. The Trust and Marvell have also been gathering information and making observations about the upland area between the privately owned Pier 78 and the city DOT ferry terminal at Pier 79, and we've begun a conversation with the private owner as well. The frontages at Pier 78 and 79 are in fact incredibly complicated due to the confluence of buses and Ubers and taxis and pedestrians and cyclists, and they all essentially use the area not as planned, which is the point that we have been making to people as we've been presenting things. And I think everybody sort of understands that this is a unique and important opportunity to improve things.
I mean, if I could just, I want to give you props and Robert and stuff. I've been attending community events like this for like years, and Christine has as well. I know Pam has. It was amazing to be in this room and not know anybody, in the sense that usually you're with the same people, and that was not at all the case here. People who love the park, really came out from the neighborhood, who don't show up to community meetings otherwise, and just what a wonderful experience it was at the table to have these discussions. So bravo for that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, the word, I'll credit Robert Atterbury. He hounded people, I think, to make sure that they posted this. We also had signs in the park. And I will also say that I think that this neighborhood of the city, that there are so many tourists, that I think for residents in this area feeling like we are giving them love for their section of chance to have a new public park was recognized. And we got, in fact, a really lovely note complimenting the design team, but also suggesting that the meeting should be a model for how the public engages with communities. It was very nice. We're also continuing to do design work on the estuarium, and we will be hoping to have some updates for everyone within another couple of months. The trust has made significant progress on the approvals process for the $1 million HUD grant related to improving pedestrian safety and security at Pier 40 that was made by Congressman Nadler through an appropriation a few years ago, or 2 years ago, I think. We have to go through environmental reviews and other things to comply with the HUD processes. The trust hopes to receive final approval from HUD soon so that we can begin procuring the contractors to perform the work later this year. I'll pause for any questions.
Do we have concerns about receiving this money, given any recent executive orders or?
It's a
changes?
legitimate question. This is a $1 million grant, not a $50 million
correct,
grant. It's for pretty basic pedestrian safety improvements, nothing that is changing, frankly, uses or anything else like that. But we will be paying attention to that. But HUD's been very helpful picking up the phone and talking with us. So yeah, so far so good. I'll move on to real estate matters next. In December, the Department of City Planning released the draft scope of work for 2 potential redevelopments at 801 11th Avenue between 55th and 56th Streets and 629 West 54th Street at 12th Avenue. Because the developers' proposed sites are within the Hudson River Park Special District, each developer would need to purchase excess development rights from the trust to support their requested rezonings to allow the higher floor area ratios. As you know, the trust does not yet have a formal position on these proposals. We're still very much in the early stages of negotiations with each developer. We've also not yet determined which of the possible granting sites to recommend to the board of directors to be used for any such sales if we advance with them. We will continue to keep the directors informed as negotiations and the public process continue. In addition to the city's ULURP approvals for the rezoning and special permits, the transfer of development rights requires a significant action process and approval by the trust board of directors, as you know from previous sales. As I informed the directors,
Any sense of the magnitude of that?
sorry?
Any sense of the magnitude of what those rights might be worth?
They are subject to an appraisal. We are hopeful that they could make a meaningful dent in Pier 76's eventual construction, meaningful. But, I think that the real estate climate, has to be considered. It's probably a little bit different than it was, although I am recently reading that it may be improving again a bit. So, it sort of depends on what the timing for all of this is. As I informed the directors last week, Governor Hochul has included $85 million in her proposed state budget to be used towards the redevelopment. We are incredibly grateful, and we're hopeful that the adopted state budget will, of course, continue to include this allocation. So it's, we can't bank on it quite yet.
What
But
did
we-
we ask for? Oh,
It should be understood that in asking for that, I made it clear that we are in zero position to start spending all of that money right now. Like tons of planning and environmental reviews and all kinds of other things would have to happen before then. So, they don't have to have 85 million in the bank waiting for us to draw down right away. I've begun a conversation with the city about a comparable ask. When we were working with the task force, talking about how we might solve for Pier 76, my suggestion at the time had been that the city, state, and the trust each would contribute equally $50 million towards the core infrastructure, new piles, new deck, demolition of the existing structure, and that the state and city would contribute equally as they have historically on the creation of the actual public park portions of the pier. And then there's separately the private developer that would be responsible for its nut, whatever that might be in the future. So assuming this is all based on our professional in-house estimates, but we do not have designs or anything else like that yet. But the recent work at Pier 97 and otherwise informed our ability to give the cost estimates that inform the amounts that we sought. We do obviously think that the elected officials who sponsored the legislation that was signed by the governor are supportive, will continue to be supportive of this money as we go through the budget process. So I would say that I'm feeling very optimistic that this will continue to be the case. As we just talked about as well, if the development rights from the sale that we just talked about or anything else were to materialize, that would be an obvious potential source for the trust share of the infrastructure improvements. Okay. On January 6th, the trust released a request for proposals for operators for the trust's 2 newest concessions at the Gansevoort Peninsula and Chelsea Waterside Park. The trust is seeking operators for seasonal grab-and-go food and beverage services for a term of 1 year, plus 2 optional 1-year renewals. During this period, we're expecting to learn more about the demand and market for each concession at each of these locations before we issue an RFP for a longer-term operator. And proposals are due February 10th. I think some of you have been trying to share the word. If you have any ideas, we can send it out or you can share the link that's on our website. As has been previously discussed with you, the trust recently had to make the extremely difficult decision to terminate the longstanding permit held by the Pier Park and Playground Association, Inc., known as P3, for interior space on the south side of Pier 40. As you know, we made this determination based upon significant permit violations related to the unauthorized construction that the permittee undertook and which was discovered in May 2024. At that time, after securing the space physically, staff initiated safety testing and requested a meeting with the P3 Board of Directors, which occurred shortly after the incident. We learned that the nature and scale of the construction had not been discussed with the P3 Board in advance of the work either. Because by that point in the season, P3's affordable summer camp program was going to be starting shortly, the trust provided notice to the P3 Board that allowed for camp programs to occur in the undamaged permitted space and of course also on the park's ball fields while the trust continued its testing and other due diligence in the damaged portion of the P3 space. P3 was subsequently allowed to program its fall and then winter seasons, and when staff met with the P3 Board again in December, notice of the permit termination was provided verbally and shortly thereafter in writing, initially for the end of the winter season. Based on feedback from P3, the trust ultimately extended permission to use the indoor space until July 15th, allowing for the full spring season to occur as well. In the December meeting with the P3 Board of Directors, the trust notified P3 that outdoor field permits would be issued to P3 as usual after the July 15th date, assuming that they seek the playing time. The trust also stated at the time that it would not seek to introduce a commercial use into the current P3 premises in the future. The P3 indoor space was introduced to Pier 40 before the trust creation when the property was still owned by New York State DOT. As with certain other amenities in the park, such as several of our boathouses, the space is rent-free, but unlike the boathouses, there has been no public discussion or procurement for this space since the late 1990s. In the years since the P3 use was introduced, other youth baseball and softball leagues that are also nonprofits have come to rely heavily on using the P3 indoor space for their programs and operations. The Greenwich Village Little League and Downtown Little League have each written to us to express the tremendous impact that loss of indoor space for baseball and softball will have on their programming in various ways. The trust has also heard from several community leaders and at the recent advisory council meeting about these and other concerns. We've tried to communicate that we made the decision reluctantly, but that we thought it was necessary because of our responsibilities as stewards of public property. In writing to the Greenwich Village Little League, the trust has committed that we will be listening to the community about how this space can continue to serve the youth sports community that is such an integral part of Pier 40 and Hudson River Park overall. We've also promised not to seek a commercial use for the space. We've stated that we are certainly very open to the space continuing to be used for baseball and softball. Community Board 2 has scheduled a meeting about this issue in early March, and we expect that many people will attend to tell us that the space is uniquely valuable for youth baseball and softball. In the meantime, staff intends to work with GVLL and other affected leagues to support the transition as feasible, and we will keep the directors informed as discussions continue. I'm going to pause there.
Do you anticipate having another use in there anytime soon? in that space or any other permanent use in there anytime soon? After the sort of,
Well, what we committed is that A, we would listen to the community,
Yeah.
tell us what is most important. B, obviously, that it would continue to be for youth sports. I expect that about, many people will say it should be for baseball or softball. As to, how that is next shaped, the trust has several ways that we can think about it. But, for the time being, we're trying to focus on the transition period and anything that we can do to make it easier for the leagues that are very, very much still at Pier 40 and will continue to be on all the outdoor fields.
Yeah, well, I know, I had an investment there. My kids play there. It's an amazing program and the trust supported it for, what's that, 2.5 decades? Like it's really too bad that anyone's being criticized for not supporting that use when they had it. And I know it was really hard for you guys. So thanks for keeping us in the loop and a couple of us too who had a history there. But I think you guys know as well as anyone that you've already promised everything people will ask. So hopefully the ire will be tamped down.
Yeah, I think, part of it is there's a long history of fear about Pier 40. And I think that may play into some of this as well.
I think a commitment to move towards there in that space and non-commercial is that's as much as we can do.
So, we'll keep trying to reach out to the leagues and try to understand if there's anything we can do to mitigate in the short term while we try to figure out the longer term. We will try to do it.
and P3 was sort of a group to serve all of these or?
No, well, sort of. It is its own nonprofit. And over the decades, it's evolved because it's rather uniquely indoor space right next to a ball field. Other leagues have come to rely on being able to, they have some great coaches. Other leagues actually, book time with the coaches at P3 as part of their programs. There's space where people get their uniforms delivered and like thousands of kids in the Greenwich Village Little League, right? So there are a variety of uses that the leagues are making known to us about how they've relied on the space.
The real thing is baseball can't be played in the rain. I mean, that's really the biggest issue. I mean, other leagues function without this kind of space. It's the camp thing. You've got kids.
I'll keep moving with River Project and public programming. The Trust hosted its 4th annual Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan Science Sanctuary meeting earlier this month. Regional experts, local university and college faculty, environmental partners, and the Research and Habitat Enhancement Subcommittee joined the Trust River Project team to discuss research, progress, and priorities. The Trust shared updates on 7 internal research projects, including fish ecology, environmental DNA, plastic pollution, water quality, pathogens, and studies focused on park habitat enhancement efforts. New this year, we brought together a panel of experts to discuss the innovative research underway at the Tribeca and Gansevoort habitat enhancement projects. Visiting scholars also presented on their research in the park, sharing findings related to oyster recruitment and biofouling dynamics on habitat structures, environmental DNA, and meta-barcoding analysis of Pier 97 water samples from the lower Hudson River, and the microbial communities and presence of antibiotic resistance genes on microplastic. The River Project will be hosting the annual Estuarine Sanctuary Management Plan Technical Advisory Council meeting on February 19th to share a comprehensive review of the year and to look ahead to upcoming projects, programs, and partnerships. Here at the Pier 57 Discovery Tank Classroom, New York City schools can book winter field trips with our River Project on a full range of STEM topics, including climate change, pollution, and environmental justice. And the space is not just for children, as River Project will be kicking off the monthly Science After Dark series for adult learners in February, who may then get to enjoy tequila next year. The Public Programs Department is busy planning the 2025 event season. We'll certainly share the calendar of events with the directors once it's prepared. Outside, our fantastic horticulture operations and facilities teams have been busy removing snow and ice throughout the park. Earlier this week, staff did a terrific job repairing a water main break that occurred over the weekend in front of Pier 40. We'll say that is a mighty tricky location for keeping the traffic moving while digging a big hole right in front of the entrance area. Did very well. And also that the Hudson Meridian Sienna's builder contract actually was a very valuable tool to have in this case when we needed an emergency repair on a holiday weekend or associated with the holiday weekend. Or was that last week? Sorry. This week was a normal week, sorry. The trust filed both its annual Minority Women Business Enterprise and Service Disabled Veterans 2025-26 goal plans with the state on January 15th, 2025 as required. For fiscal year 2024 to 25, the trust achieved its goal of utilizing MWBE certified firms for over 30% of its contracted services. For service disabled veteran businesses, we achieved a 2.95% subcontractor utilization against our 6% goal. While the state has been working to increase the number of certified service disabled businesses, there are still not a sufficient number of them to perform the types of work at the required scale for many of the trust procurement needs. While there are many more certified MWBE businesses, for certain of our work, such as heavy marine construction, there has long been a lack of qualified MWBE firms. The trust continues to try to use discretionary purchasing and procurements to provide opportunities for MWBEs and SDVOBs for prime contracts less than $500,000. You saw several of them in your board materials today. With that said, we've had to waive MWBE requirements for some of the much larger marine construction contracts and other things because of lack of subcontracting opportunities. We'll continue training all staff on MWBE and SDVOB programs, and will continue to attend conferences and meetings offered by the state to improve outreach to certified firms. The trust has now posted the proposed fiscal year 26 budget on its website and at 5 locations throughout Hudson River Park. And I'm going to invite Kim Jimenez up to give a preview of that report.
Thanks, Maureen. Last week on January 22nd, the Finance Committee met with staff to review the preliminary budget for fiscal year 26, which commences on April 1st. I, along with Sikander Zuberi, presented the preliminary budget in detail, which I won't do today, as in compliance with state finance law. After the meeting, we posted the preliminary budget on our website, and as Noreen said, at 5 locations throughout the park, which is still a state requirement, including a large printout in the Pier 40 lobby. In March, the Finance Committee will again meet to review the budget, including any proposed updates. Because we need budget approval before April 1st, it is very important that we have a quorum at that March meeting, and which is currently being scheduled. So Chris Fazio will be reaching out soon to board members to determine the best timing for the board meeting. The full proposed budget, along with current projections for year-end FY25, is included in your board packets. All materials are currently also available on the Trust website. I will review a few of the proposed FY26 budget highlights, and you can certainly be in touch with me, Sikander, or Noreen with any questions or any clarifications that you'd like. Conservative budgeting over the past 3 years has called for a modest operating surplus before capital maintenance expenditures. And these capital maintenance expenditures net of outside funding resources or restricted funds, which are typically city, state, or available air rights funds. As you know, the trust has a practice of applying operating surpluses towards the cost of capital maintenance. In these past few years, in these past few years, the trust actually achieved higher operating surpluses than we have budgeted. And that is also going to be the case with our current projections for FY25. Emphasis on completing new construction these past few years has crowded out the conducting of CAP-M projects. The staff bandwidth has factored into the ability to commence certain projects. Permitting delays and extended procurements in the current fiscal year have also delayed our ability to commence many of the 25.8 million capital maintenance projects that we had budgeted in current year FY '25. This tide is expected to turn in the next fiscal year, as you will see in the numbers proposed for FY '26. Many of the marine and Pier 40 capital maintenance projects originally scheduled for FY '25 are now scheduled for FY '26. And a total of 49.8 million in capital maintenance projects are now scheduled for the upcoming fiscal year, FY '26. With a new construction manager at-risk contract in place and the awarding of a new marine construction contract, the trust expects significant spending on capital maintenance in the coming fiscal year. Total revenues are proposed to be budgeted to remain steady in FY '26 with a budgeted 6.6% increase. Operating expenses are proposed at flat to slightly down, less than 1% decline, generating a higher operating surplus projected before capital expenditures than we budgeted in the current fiscal year. So right now we're projecting a $7.8 million surplus as opposed to the originally budgeted $4.8 million surplus for FY '25. However, with a proposed capital maintenance budget of almost 50 million next year, which will be funded by 23 million in outside funds, which are mostly the balance of the development rights funds that we currently have on hand, the trust expects to call on accumulated reserves to fund vital capital maintenance projects in FY '26. Also, spending on new capital projects in FY '26 is proposed at 6.3 million, with 73% of that funded by available government and restricted funds. So as a whole, a budgeted operating surplus will turn into a net deficit of 20.8 million in FY '26 after all net capital expenditures, which are twice that originally budgeted in FY '25. This spending will be funded by the accumulated surplus of recent years. We will update these FY '26 budget numbers in March as necessary and return to the Finance Committee and the board with a final proposed budget and a detailed presentation at the March board meeting. The approved budget will then be posted on our website, again at 5 locations throughout the park. If anybody wants to change that law. Thank you. Sure.
On the new construction side, capital new construction, 6.1 million, shouldn't that be 100% covered by city and state?
No,
sources?
it isn't always. It wasn't in this fiscal year. Do you want to?
No, go ahead.
The capital, the new project capital expenditures planned for next year are all mostly on planning for projects that will then be funded under a larger budget.
And can those be funded retroactively when funding, if it's planning in the early years, is there?
Theoretically, yes, but it doesn't have to be. We have the funds on hand right now to
So
supplement that.
the specific one that is quite active as a design contract right now is the estuarian contract. And my recommendation to the board a couple of years ago was that the board or that the trust self-fund the design contract. And that we would preserve the portion of state and city monies that we already had for eventual construction. So that is the biggest of these, the self-funded 6 point whatever.
So it's intentional for choices.
Yeah.
And what are the reserves? What are we dipping into for this?
When Hudson River Park was created, the state was directed, can people hear, can the public hear me if I'm here? I'll stand next to Kim. We'll stand together here. When Hudson River Park was created, the State Department of Transportation was directed to give, to hand the newly created Hudson River Park Trust the rental revenues that it had received for the state portions of the property at that point, which the trust has created initially as the reserves. Over the years, as we have had one-shot deals for the Chelsea Piers lease, for example, the other last year, or the Amtrak easement. We have added to the reserves as feasible, invested them pursuant to our investment guidelines. And over the years, we've had to draw down on them sometimes. We use them for working capital. We have to advance payments that are sometimes reimbursed, sometimes that takes years. We use it for our rainy day fund. And we are circumspect about when we use them for our own direct construction purposes, but that is essentially what the reserves are.
Very helpful, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank him and Secretary Zaber, he worked very hard on all the details of the budget, which is, we try to have a transparent presentation for the public. Also, I will say that with respect to all those capital maintenance projects that Kim was mentioning, you deserve a deeper understanding of what those are as well. So we will make sure that you have that.
You want to mention the 9-month financials is in the board packet?
Do you want to?
So, you know, in your board packet, you also have the 9 months financials for the first 9 months of this fiscal year. Total revenues for the period were just under 34.9 million, and expenses, including capital and equipment expenditures net of reimbursements, were just under 24.6 million. And this report also gets posted on our website tomorrow.
Maureen, is it a quick question? At the end of your president's report, is a quick question. Will the change in administration affect the battery park resiliency work timing at all?
They are mostly, as I understand it, self-funding that. They all of their landlord capacities with respect to being the landlord for Goldman Sachs and Brookfield and so forth. I believe that they are intending to self-fund and bond probably.
But I guess more just, I feel like if the Army, the Corps of Army Engineers gets told to slow down because climate change doesn't exist
Yep.
anymore.
Yeah, it's a good question for all of us. Most of the particular phase that we've been talking about is, and other phases of their project are land-based, not water-based. There is a key part, our part, that is water-based. And it's relatively modest in the overall scheme of things, but if the Army Corps is told, don't do business with New York City, that will very much affect our construction too. So I hope that that would not be the case, because I think it's sort of understood that a lot of that kind of work, historically, I think nationally, there's been a lot of skepticism about the Army Corps as a planning entity. But I think it's understood that as far as certain repairs and other things are needed, that is not a particularly policy-oriented thing. It's more everybody needs to do things in the water, private businesses as well as public entities like us. So hopefully it won't cause trouble.
The Battery Park City project isn't an Army Corps project.
No.
It's not, but there's the part that's in the water that needs DEC permits and Army Corps permits.
Right, that corner, but it's not that crazy Army Corps
It's not
project
hats.
that we saw.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
It's not hats.
It's not, that's correct.
Thank you for that report. I will now ask Tammy Meltzer to present the advisory council.
Good afternoon, Happy New Year to all, and thank you very much. The Hudson River Park Advisory Council met January 27th. It was a really robust meeting, so I want to thank everybody who attended, including friends who presented. About an hour longer than we normally do. So one of those included our comments and a resolution that's been drafted to go to the trust and the board, asking in regards to the ULURP and DEIS for the Western Rail Yards. We'd like the trust to have an analysis done on the effects of the potential proposal and submit public comment to City Council on it from just the trust's perspective to protecting the estuarine sanctuary. Which I will send all that around next week. We had EDC come and do a Manhattan Cruise Terminal presentation, shared the survey around for people. Really neat, really interesting. Hope everyone who's in this room manages to attend a presentation or at least to fill out the surveys. And then we had a presentation super fast from Tom and Marvell for the improvements for sidewalk and street from 29th to 46th. It was astounding how many questions that were asked, and that was really awesome. So I want to thank everybody for their partnership. It was a long but really robust meeting. And then there was a lot of conversation about P3. We are tried as an advisory council to push back so they would all meet and go to CB2, which they are doing in March. I honestly don't believe that topic will go away very quickly or soon. There are many, every week that you think we get another letter from somewhere, and whether that's to CB1 or to the advisory council, just a heads up that that's not going to go very far. In March is our next meeting. We have Sail Forth coming, and we understand that the BPCA DEIS going to a final is delayed. We don't anticipate seeing that at least until March. So that should give you some idea on timing. My understanding is it's not the federal government holding that up necessarily, but they still have some other work to do. And yes, that pinch point that we're all talking about is actually one of the most important parts to protect, because that is where the water flooded in and there was a death down the street because the water came in at the pinch point of where the Hudson River Park ends and Battery Park City begins. So we look forward to that up and coming. Thank you very much for your support. We will file the resolution next week with everybody. Any questions? Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't say you are all always welcome to attend at any point, either by Zoom or in person. Enjoy your day.
Thank you for that. Is there any further business? Hearing none, I note that not while on the agenda, a few directors were requested that we move into executive session. I now request that the directors move into executive session and that we adjourn the public portion of the meeting. The executive session will not include items for approval by the directors. May I please have a motion to move into executive session and adjourn the public portion of today's meeting? Seconds? Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the motion is approved. Thank you. The public portion of this meeting is now adjourned. The trust will now stop the Zoom live recording and the directors will now move in executive session.